Richard Thomson.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. It's a pleasure to take part in what is, I think, a very timely debate as we surely head towards a cold Tory winter of discontent, of high prices and shortages and rising unemployment. Now, I'm very privileged to represent a constituency in the north east of Scotland, which is generally regarded as an area which is prosperous. It's certainly suffered from the oil and gas downturn over the last few years. It's still to benefit from the transition to renewable energy technologies that we all fervently hope to see, and it's certainly borne its brunt of the austerity agenda that we've experienced in recent years. The constituency that I represent is a mix of urban and rural, taking in a slice of the north of the city of Aberdeen, as well as extending out into the rural countryside with a mix of small towns and villages. And while the economic statistics might show that it's got one of the highest levels of gross value added in Scotland, never mind the UK, never mind Europe, that hides the reality of the experience for far too many who live there. Now, if you were to go to the go-to data set of the Scottish Index of Multiple Deprivation and look at Aberdeenshire in particular, you would maybe pick up a handful of streets that would show a concentrated amount of deprivation, but that misses out important parts of the picture. It misses the individual stories that are hidden within that, because the reality is there is a significant amount of rural deprivation and a range of intersecting factors which contribute to that. There is the perennial issue, as I know myself, living in a small community, of trying to find childcare. Now, the Scottish Government is tackling that with its 1,140 hours of free childcare, which is no exaggeration to say will be an absolute game changer for many with young families in Scotland. There are the additional costs of heating, particularly when you're off the grid. If you get your energy for heating and for cooking from heating oil, then you don't get the opportunity to go on Money Supermarket and just shop around for the best supplier. There's a very limited number of suppliers, and you have to buy in bulk. And despite some of the many laudable community initiatives that have come through the community planning system to try and take the edge off of that for people, still it is an additional expense from rurality. There are the costs of transport. Not everybody lives near a public transport link, so there is the added cost of having to run a car in order to get to work and get about and to access public services when public transport is not always an option. But through austerity, people have been hard-pressed, as I say, for a number of years. And I think it's easy for those who've never lived in that type of environment, or who have never experienced scarcity or shortage in any significant way themselves, to fully understand how expensive it can be to be short of money. You buy what you can afford, not what lasts best. You pay more for your energy, particularly, as many colleagues have said, if you're trapped into a prepayment meter with everything that goes with that. Credit and access to financial services is much harder, and it's often more expensive when it is available. And that deprivation hits those as well who might also at one point have been seen as doing well. We could call them, as some have, the precariat. There's a significant number of people right across Scotland and the UK who are probably no more than a missed paycheck or a significant household expense away from being in serious financial difficulties. And I would just like to cite the example of a Citizens Advice Bureau. It's not in my own constituency, it's in the neighbouring constituency to the south of West Aberdeenshire and Kincardine, but it does cover areas of my constituency, and I don't believe its experience is atypical in this. Now, it's located in West Hill. It's located in what on the surface would look like a very prosperous set of communities there and round about, but it's actually a Citizens Advice Bureau that has one of the highest rates of people coming through its doors in search of debt advice. Right across the north east again, food bank use is common. There is not a community which is unserved, and sadly, as we've heard before, like other areas, demand is only heading in one direction, and that direction, sadly, is not down. For me, Madam Deputy Speaker, tackling poverty means many things, but above all, it means treating people as citizens. It means treating them with dignity. It means enabling them to participate fully in society on their own terms, shorn of the shame of being left without. And I think I have to ask, what does it say for this government here in particular, that it's made a set of policy choices, particularly over the last fortnight, that it seeks to make it harder for families and individuals to provide that dignity for themselves and to be able to participate as they might wish in that wider society.
Would you agree that people in my constituency, Swansea West and elsewhere, who voted in good faith for Brexit, for more money, more control, more jobs, have seen a sort of Brexit dividend, which is basically rising prices of food because of food barriers and falling currency, and now we see national insurance going up, universal credit going down. So do you think the poorest should get an injection of money to make up for that rather than being hammered?
I thank the honourable gentleman for that intervention, and I think he makes a very succinct and powerful point about the way that people voted in good faith for something which has turned out to be a fiction and a fantasy. And while I would always argue for more money to help those who are most in need, to boost consumption, it's an economic benefit there as well, I think one of the first steps you could take is not to take money away. And if he waits patiently, you may hear that I have more to say on that later in my speech, but I think he makes a very powerful point there. Now, in his remarks in response to the opening speeches, the Minister spoke of the need to make tough choices. It's that macho rhetoric, it's fine, easy words, which I have to say, Madam Deputy Speaker, fall a great deal harder on those and whose those choices impact than they do on the perennial Conservative and Unionist Party self-conceit of being a party of low taxation, which they seldom seem to ever live up to in office in any meaningful way. Because, Madam Deputy Speaker, those tough choices come with very long-standing consequences. The impacts on people's children, the impacts on family life and well-being, it impacts on your health, it impacts on your self-esteem, it impacts on your opportunities, it impacts on life chances, and it does so across generations. In the last fortnight alone, we've seen the triple lock gone, removing the link between earnings and pensions. We've seen the end of furlough being heralded. We're seeing the £1,040 cut to universal credit. We've seen a manifesto pledge broken not to increase national insurance, and a move which is going to hit the youngest and the poorest the hardest, and it's going to embed generational and geographical inequalities and bake them into our social economic reality for generations to come. And as the member said, it has been exacerbated by Brexit, with the shortages of products that is going to bring, allied to the increases in prices which will accompany that. I certainly will.
On that, does he feel that after a decade of austerity, after all of the hits from Brexit, after COVID, this is the worst possible time to be taking money away from people?
I couldn't agree more with the honourable member for Aberdeen North, and I was deficient. I should have said that earlier on what a magnificent speech it was that she made earlier, encapsulating what it really means to be without and to be in search of that dignity. And she's absolutely correct in that. This is absolutely the worst time to be carrying away that support. It's almost like the Chancellor's gone out to the pub for a round of drinks, and he's carried the drinks. It's a very complicated order. He's staggered across the floor with a big tray, and when he gets to about 1 yard away from the table, as we'll probably have to measure it now, he decides to go and drop the whole lot and leave it smashed on the floor, having carried the economy this far. It is inept, to say the least of it. I'll give, with great pleasure, the honourable gentleman's been waiting some considerable amount of time, so I can't wait to hear what he's got to say.
I always wait a long time to hear from the honourable gentleman from Gordon, but he's speaking about the worst possible decision at the worst possible time. As we face a global energy crisis, does he not agree that it's the worst possible decision to allow the Greens into coalition government into Scotland? And does he agree that it will affect my Murray constituents and his Gordon constituents if they get their way and have the oil industry transition or die and shut down in the next 10 years?
Surprisingly for a gentleman who has served in both parliaments, I would thought he would be quite au fait with the constitutional settlement, that there is no decision that can ever be taken in Holyrood that would bring that about, but the situation about that he describes. However, However, when I'm on my feet, the honourable gentleman needs to be on his seat, as I believe he said last week to somebody more senior than either of us for the moment. But nevertheless, the Scottish Government has managed to, through this deal with the Greens, it's investing money in the energy transition, actual money on the table, which has not been put on the table despite the big words from the UK Government. It is delivering in terms of infrastructure for my constituents, in terms of the investment in the road and the examination of possible future rail investment, and I am certain that the benefits will flow through to the honourable gentleman's constituent in Murray as well, even though I have absolutely no doubt that he will find the worst possible angle he can try to put on it for his election leaflets when he's next up for election. But we have a UK Government, Madam Deputy Speaker, which speaks the language of levelling up, while simultaneously grinding down on those who work the hardest and those who have the least. And I personally would much rather that we judged our efforts on the fairness that we exhibit in our approach to government and the equality of opportunity that we can offer to all, regardless of our means or our background, to deliver the improved outcomes that we all strive for. If we want to build back better and build back fairer, Scotland quite clearly needs to be well away from the baleful influence of Conservatives in this place and from the continued rule of Westminster Conservative governments. Thank you.